Yes, welcome to the No State Project live from the fortified compound here in Mesa, Arizona. Glad to be with you here again. And we got a pretty good regular schedule going here on the No State Project. I think this is like a month now. So not only have we made every show, I don't want to jinx anything here, but I don't think we've had a tech issue that made it so we couldn't do a show or have callers, which would be really bad for today. But I'll get to that. I want to thank everyone for their continued support of the show, especially Chris in Northern California. I can't tell you, I will be calling you, but I really do appreciate the generous donation, the continued support of the show, and everyone else who is able to contribute some to the support of the show. It is very much appreciated. I know that I'm in a similar situation as a lot of people. I don't have a pot to piss in, but some still give, and I do appreciate that. So if you want to help support the show, again, it's really appreciated. You could do so at markstevens.sells.com. That's SELZ, markstevens.sells.com, and markstevens.net. And of course, markstevens.net, you can get government indicted. You can get the scripts. You can get the motion templates, which, contrary to a couple of YouTubers, we've got a mountain of evidence that has been successful. And my surprise co-host today is somebody who has been on the show before. It's been a while, but he can also testify with personal firsthand knowledge of going in and effectively defending himself on serious charges. And so you got to look at the evidence. And that's what we do here on the No State Project. We look at the evidence. The evidence should speak for itself. And you go to markstevens.net. Under the success stories, many hundreds of people have been able to replicate the success that I have had and others have had. So the model that we use is all laid out in Government Indicted. And again, you can get that at markstevens.net. If you want to join me here on the big broadcast today, it is 218-632-9399, 218-632-9399. The passcode is 2020 with the pound sign or hashtag. That'll get you into the queue. However, we're already starting to line up, but I do have a surprise co-host today. And again, he's been on the show before. We've missed him tremendously. We have not heard from him, and he was always a big part of the show. Glad to have him back. He makes me put the cones on really early, but we love him anyway. Welcome back, Calvin.
Hey there, Milky Liquor. What you say there, Liver Lips?
I'm sorry. Do we have a tech issue already? Can you say that again? Welcome back, Calvin.
I said, hey there, Milky Liquor. What you say there, Liver Lips?
I don't know if it's my headset or it's your audio, but it sounds like it's pretty muddy.
Oh, let me see. Let me try something a little different here.
You guys can tell me in the live stream how Calvin sounds.
How am I sounding now?
To me, it's kind of muddy, but I can deal with it. Hopefully that's not, is he coming, is Calvin coming over the stream muddy?
I hear you loud and clear on my end.
Yeah, you're a little bit, yeah, someone's saying it is a little muffled, so I don't know what we need to do about that. Yeah, you're coming out pretty muddy.
How about now? Any better?
Well, it's a little better. Let me bump up the volume.
Okay, well, I'm glad to be returning from sabbatical with no outstanding warrants, by the way.
Well, that's always good.
Yeah, I got a kick out of how you mentioned that in your last show. So I caught up on some of your videos recently and have some commentary on the on your latest video. But yeah, I like how you pointed out that it was no outstanding warrants. So yep. But yeah, I also appreciate the bureaucratic robot impersonation.
So I'm sorry, because it said that again.
the bureaucratic robot impersonation where they needed to, where the bureaucrat kept telling you that you needed to speak to the city attorney, or as I said before, Mark.
Yeah, gosh, I do hate when I hear that. That's how you know, guys.
Am I
You're in a
sounding any
loop.
clearer?
I'm sorry?
Am I sounding any clearer? Is my line
It's a
clean?
little better than when we started, but it's still someone thinks you're oversaturated. I thought that was more of a Photoshop thing, but it doesn't sound overmodulated, but it just sounds really like the low end is really heavy.
Okay, well, let me hang up and give you a call back. Maybe that'll help out.
Okay.
All right.
All right, we'll get back with Calvin in just a moment. Glad. Hopefully, we get that straightened out. Because, we got a lot of stuff that we want to cover and want to get to, because it is the 1 year anniversary. I don't know if that's the right word to use, but it's been a whole year since the reporter Jamal Khashoggi, the journalist, was killed, butchered alive by a Saudi hit squad. And it's one of the things we're going to be discussing. So hopefully we got Calvin back. All right, let's see. Give us a test there, tough guy.
Can you hear me now?
Well, it's a little better, but we'll have to. It'll. He says,
okay. Well, let's not continue the show with this, but yeah, the anatomy of a frivolous argument was a pretty good video. I like how you're able to dissect that down into 3 elements. That if you can identify those 3 elements, you know that you are dealing with a frivolous argument there.
Yeah, it's funny if you go and you read some of the comments, because you get into some of the this particular critic, and you can see how they do the moving of the goalpost. They did it on that particular video. So if anybody wants a good laugh, go look at the comments there. So real brief, the comment was, and it's still there. And so anybody, since I'm talking about it, maybe it would be smart to screen cap that so it doesn't get deleted. But somebody makes a comment that, isn't it funny that there's absolutely no evidence whatsoever of Mark Stevens using his own material in his own court case. You think after 20 years there'd be at least one, but there's no evidence. So I post an example of the evidence. And then like, well, I obviously meant if the motion was granted and it was. Oh, come on. So for those who aren't familiar, moving the goalposts is when you make a statement or a claim, or let's say an argument, and somebody counters that argument and defeats it or debunks your claim, and then you come out, well, that's not what I really said. What I really meant was this, and you just keep moving the goalposts. That's what that means, and that's what this individual does, because they disagree just for the sake of disagreeing, and it's at a point now where. I made the mistake, Calvin, of actually responding to a YouTube comment like that from this individual. I will not do that again. I'm just going to let them blow smoke and say whatever the hell they want, I guess, and just chalk it up to the fact it's just a YouTube comment, and it's really not relevant to anything.
Well, and as I've always liked to say too, there's a whole success story section on the website for anyone who doubts whether or not the questions are effective in court. You can just go there, and shouldn't really matter who it hasn't worked for. I think the record speaks for itself. I don't see the need to defend yourself against the one of few trolls that come around and they have to spew their toxic goalpost, moving of the goalpost.
Yeah, well, what I've taken to doing is, if I think that the criticism is something I should respond to, I generally won't address the name of the poster. I'll just address the argument and leave it at that. So if someone posts something that's not true, or they're criticizing something that I've presented here on the show, most of the time I may address the individual, but for a certain number of them, I'll just address the argument, because it's not worth getting into the names. And ultimately, Calvin, the one who's putting out the argument is not necessarily relevant anyway to defeating the argument. That's not something that we play. We don't play the ad hominem or, a similar personal type of things. So whoever this person may not be, whether they're male or female, we don't really know, doesn't ultimately matter. What matters is if they are putting it forth some kind of dissent and there is some merit to it, then I'll address the merit or lack of merit of the argument and don't get into the names, which again are ultimately, really not relevant, especially since we're dealing with YouTube comments and people have anonymity. We don't
Hey,
know. Hey,
DJ, can you just play Misty for me?
I'm sorry?
I said, hey, DJ, can you just play Misty for me?
Yeah. If I wouldn't get a copyright strike, I'd cue that up for you. That was good.
Yeah.
and the funny thing, I'm glad you brought that up because nobody, when I looked at the comments there, nobody seemed to get the reference, which is really unfortunate because I thought it was hilarious. I thought it was right on point. I thought it was funny. But like you mentioned when we caught up yesterday, a lot of the jokes that I say on here are a little too obscure, and so we can guess that a lot of the members of the audience and people who watch that were born after 1975. So
obscurity might be, but I think he aged well.
Yeah. Well, what do you? So one of the things. So let's just jump right into this, guys. The thing that I thought was interesting with all the stuff going on now was that Jamal Khashoggi was murdered a year ago this week, and who has been charged with that?
I don't think anyone as of yet. No,
because the Turkish government said that, and even the American spy agencies that it went to the Crown Prince, that there was evidence that he was behind that. I mean, Jamal Khashoggi was pretty critical, as any rational adult would be, of the Saudi Arabian government, which is one of the most brutal, backwards, watch yourself, one of the most brutal, regimes in modern history. I mean, they still kill people for the crime of being gay. Holy crap! I mean, yeah, homosexuals were still abused well into the 80s, but it wasn't legal to kill them in the United States. It was just generally accepted. Unfortunately, society just generally accepted it was okay to persecute people who are homosexual. But the Saudi Arabian government and other governments in the Middle East, they put people to death for no other reason than they're homosexual. But they give Trump a lot of money. So that equals it out, right?
Yeah, well, there seems to be a lot of collusion and conflicts of interest between those in the upper echelons of government and in other governments. I mean, who figured they'd play for the same team? The Trump administration is also involved with a lot of mass surveillance spyware with the Israeli government and with DARPA and with our intelligence agencies too. So they have a lot of territory to protect.
They're knee deep in it with Saudi Arabia for the war in Yemen. So many of the munitions that are going and killing innocent people are made right here in the United States. Trump even said, well, they give me tens of millions of dollars. I'm not supposed to take it. I'm not supposed to like them. And then he actually gets on TV and brags about selling, billions of dollars worth of arms to this barbaric regime. It's
very similar. It's very similar to the case with the beheadings that took place so long ago with ISIS. Just like with Khashoggi here, he was involved in breaking stories against the Saudi Arabian government. I think it was. I'm not sure if it was Daniel Berg. I forget exactly, which is terrible, exactly who it was, but he ended up beheading one of the lead investigators on who was tracking the finances of the hijackers of 9/11. They got a hold of him while he was in the Middle East and beheaded him. So it's funny how they are able to target people who compromise, all these operations, all these intelligence operations.
Yeah, they're all in bed together, and it's kind of surreal to me because you realize that so many of the crimes and the that are done, like bombing a bus of children, and and it's just considered collateral damage, and everyone just seems to be okay with that because, hey, they're 8,000 miles away, they're brown people. And you look at the level of depravity that governments have, and what's blowing my perception or my view of the world is that, well, it's the best way to say this. It's considering all the crimes, like covering up Khashoggi, and letting that get away with, and Trump saying that if you investigate the Bidens, I'll look the other way on Hong Kong. And to think that asking for the government of Ukraine to help investigate the Bidens could actually lead to an impeachment. It's like all these other things that he's done. Nothing. But a phone call to the Ukraine is enough to get him impeached. It's hard to make sense of that. How do we know what is real and what isn't real when it's being, as you mentioned 9/11, so much of 9/11 was BS, but I can't simply go back.
That was Daniel Berg, by the way, who I wanted to mention,
right,
who was investigating the finances with the hijackers. But yeah.
Yeah, that's right. I remember that. I don't want to be like one of these Trump supporters and say that everything coming out on the news is completely fake if it's negative, that it's only real if you get it from his Twitter, that his Twitter is the only source of facts, true facts, and, or alternative facts, as it may be. To me, it is mind blowing that all those other crimes that governments typically commit, it's all okay. But asked to have
there's a lot of collusion with Trump and the Department of Defense. There's he's working to install a surveillance state with similar to DARPA. There was a Liz Fed is proposed this. She wants to. She's calling it HARPA, which is the Health Advanced Research Projects Agency, and they want to be able to monitor all the communications to respond to emergencies. Of course, they want to limit it to shootings right now, but the thing is with the neural behavioral patterning that they're wanting to implement, you could repurpose that for anything if you want. And this is the Trump administration is directly involved with this, working with Peter Thiel. Whitney Webb has done a pretty good series write-up on all these connections. But the Trump administration isn't, it's not that it's not bought and paid for. They definitely have their conflicts of interest. A lot of people want to say, oh, well, he's not owned by, this corporation or not, or that one. But if you do a little investigative digging, you'll find that that's completely not the case. And there's even an Epstein connection with Trump and these intelligence ties. So, but she gets all into that with her reporting. So, have you come across any of Whitney Webb's investigative reporting?
It sounds familiar. I think I actually read part of the story she did. She was doing a 3-part series on Epstein's connections, and I cited quite a bit of that. Right. I think that's who you're talking about. So she goes into a lot of the history of the mafia, of course, La Cosa Nostra, using bribery, extortion and blackmail to keep politicians in line. And so they use the example of J. Edgar Hoover, that they had a lot of compromising photos and video of him, and that's something that kept him in line. So it was years before he even admitted that there was even organized crime, that it even existed. He always downplayed, no, it doesn't even exist. So she also goes through and shows some of the connections in the government that he had, and people in the government that used and worked with mafioso to blackmail politicians and keep them in line. I just don't know how reliable the source is that reported that during that Alexander Acosta, who gave that sweetheart deal to not only Epstein but his co-conspirators, mm-hmm. when he said, because that's where that comes from. Somebody alleges that Alexander Acosta was confronted by the Trump administration on that, and he said, "Well, look, he's way above my pay grade. The guy's, and he's an intelligence asset." I don't know if that's true, but everything that we know about Epstein and all the enormous volumes of pictures and videos and the information that he had, all the context that this man had, and the fact that he got he got no prison time, he had part-time jail. Okay, and his co-conspirators were given immunity. Potential co-conspirators too. That to me smacks of this guy is not just well connected and has a lot of connected friends. This smacks of an intelligence operation to keep politicians in line. But again, I'm going just based on that little bit
too. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Acosta is quoted as saying that the reason why they backed off in Florida with the first set of charges was because that he was an intelligence asset. And I'm not sure if that was Acosta or someone else, but I think that's a matter of the record that they were backing off his case because of his intelligence ties. And I'm pretty sure that was a quote. Now, from who I can't remember, but it's definitely a Google search away.
Yeah, I see. It's someone who claims he said it, and I'm inclined to believe it, but it's not something that we can be sure of. It's not the same as, well, you've got no actual evidence that Donald Trump is actually soliciting a foreign government to help get information to use against a political rival. He's actually doing it. I mean, that we could be absolutely certain because he's doing it publicly. He's done it a number of times this past week. He admits it and doesn't think. I mean, and his attorney admitted the Ukraine stuff months ago. It just started getting steam in the last couple of weeks because of the whistleblower report. But the issue with, did Acosta really say that? We don't know for sure. We have a report. I don't even know the name of the source. I don't even know if the source is named. So it's just something that's being reported. But what is interesting here and bears on why I think that is the fact that they're not investigating Alexander Acosta and the other attorneys that went and also to why they made that decision. It hasn't been fully fleshed out and investigated. And, he was allowed to just retire. He knows what's going on. Why isn't he put under oath and questioned exactly why he did that? And the fact that he's not is more fuel for the fire. That this guy may have been involved with intelligence in blackmailing politicians. I mean, it happened. I mean, look, we know it happens. The CIA has admitted to doing that. That goes back to the church commission back in the 70s, just like they admitted to having a heart attack gun.
Yeah, it smells like it to me.
If it looks like, who was it? James Watt that said, if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, and you got yourself a duck. But bottom line, we do know that Jeffrey Epstein, the facts that we can be fairly certain on is that Jeffrey Epstein was trafficking in children, teenage girls between the ages of 13 and 16. We know that
they got photos to prove that too.
They got photos to prove that, and he videotaped. They have videotapes of his parties, and we haven't seen it, but we know that there are videotapes. But this also raises thing: why was his island? What did they recover after he died? They went and they raided his island and they took hard drives and the pictures. What's being done with that? I mean, the prosecution against him is but what about his co-conspirators? That's a big unanswered question here. Why in the hell are at least the named co-conspirators? Why aren't they being investigated? Why aren't they in prison? Why aren't they at least being arrested? It's because they get away with this stuff because, like Ernie says, because they can. And because they're the rich, they're the powerful, they're the ruling class, and that's why they're able to get away with it. I've reported on the show, Calvin, that I forget his name, but he was the heir to one of the Dow chemical heirs, or DuPont, and he wound up raping one of his own kids, little girl, like 5 years old. Judge didn't think he would handle prison very well. Got no time.
Well,
their money explains.
I like what you say, because they can, because you made that part of your video with the anatomy of a frivolous argument. You kind of gave a nice little hat tip to Ernie there. Is why did he go down this line of reasoning? Well, because they can.
They do it because they can. They can get away with it. And
speaking of which, I do have some commentary on your anatomy of a frivolous argument. I took some notes, just to kind of give you a little bit of feedback on that. But
okay,
there were some pretty good points you had in there. Oh yeah.
Okay, but if you're just going to call me a dishonest Jew, that's or a hook-nosed Jew, that
well, everyone knows that.
That's not really a criticism of the work. I got called that the other day. I got called a dishonest Jew and a Soros pawn the other day.
Yeah, who doesn't know that, right?
Oh, of course. I'm just a pawn. I'm a dishonest Jew, which I don't know why they keep saying that. And here, I'm on HD video right now, okay? It's a big nose, but it's not a hook nose, as I've been accused of having. But, I was also accused of being a leftist, which I wasn't an audience that was open to what I wanted to say. But anyway, I'm taking it's your floor. You have some notes.
Right, and you're a leftist, therefore every point in every statement you made is incorrect, right? So I guess that's just he would dismiss that which you disagree with. But getting back to the anatomy of a frivolous argument, of course it goes without saying, and this is a preface, and it's going to be a little long-winded, I know, but prosecutors do use the vague and unfounded objection of frivolous argument as a signal to the judge that they need to, basically get out of jail free card because they can't counter the challenge to their assertions with evidence or facts. The judge picks up on this coded signal and makes the call. Either they're going to do their job and grant the defendant a fair trial, or they're going to deny the defendant a fair hearing because it's in the best interest of government, the government team to preserve the institution of oppression despite the collateral damage, that being the defendant. Without enough social pressure from ugly truth being plainly exposed to others in and outside the courtroom, the judge is likely to side with the prosecutor as they're part of the same team, that being the state. So any defendant's main, if not sole objective, going pro per, is to expose the conflict of interest by demonstrating, through the line of question laid out in the script, it's just basically a background. The judge's eagerness to convict in face of the prosecution's severe lack of foundational evidence to support their case, and against the judge's failure to allow for an effective defense, much like in the Silk Road case in a fair hearing. Judges tend not to, if they have an outcome that they want to achieve, they're going to basically derail any effective defense. Imagine a linear spectrum on a line where you have the judge in the center and yourself and the prosecutor on each side at it, supposedly at an equal distance, to demonstrate fairness and impartiality. That's essentially the perception. The reality is the judge and prosecutor are more, closer than you are to the judge as far as, who the judge is going to favor through these hearings. So fully understanding the relationship is key to the amount of expose you'll have to perform to give yourself a fair chance at the hearing. Every judge has a different threshold for integrity. Some care little about the inherent relationship with the prosecutor, and some won't give it up for the world. Much like Kathleen Forrest, as much as in Sarah Turner, the collusion between those two. They wouldn't allow any of the witnesses or and much of the substantial arguments from defense, but they would turn around and allow every point of speculation to be levied against the defendant. Your outcome is wholly dependent on how strong that bond is and your ability to compromise or expose their conflict of interest and how the judge will allow the prosecution to proceed after you've repeatedly demonstrated that they've failed to meet their burden of proof. So with that setup and understanding, the playing field, that's essentially how you have to leverage, your questions and your defense. One of the notes I made was that, and this was new to me, but I didn't know that legal definitions were considered primary sources if they're quoted within a case, which is good to know that, when they want to dismissively marginalize any defense claiming that your terminology is that of a secondary source. So when you go through and quote these cases, a lot of times they want to say, well, oh, that's a secondary source. But, you can always come back and say, well, no, it's a primary source, as that it's pulled from other court cases. So, and like I said, it was awesome that you broke the frivolous argument into 3 very basic elements. So that, it allows for defendants to effectively counter, the prosecutor's get out of jail free card when, they want to flash the buzzword frivolous argument is so commonly used by desperate persecution. So,
yeah. Well, and that's what we need to do, though.
Very good breakdown.
Thanks. We need to do that. That's how you lay your argument out. We need to know exactly what is meant. And I'm not saying define every single word, but like you're saying, the word frivolous, when they start screeching that in court, is a signal to the judge, hey, we need to cut this guy off. Give me some help here.
Huge buzzword.
I'm sorry?
It's a huge buzzword. I mean, it's essentially a coded signal to the judge that, hey, I need some help here.
Yeah, this guy's got me on the ropes, and the only thing I can do is lie. And so I wanted, because it's necessary if people are going to go in and defend themselves, knowing they're going to do something like that, we need, knowing what it is, we're able to more effectively call them out on it. And so the two constants, because not every definition of frivolous in the courts uses the 3 prongs. They always use the 2 prongs, though. So the 2 prongs are the big, and that's what I mentioned in the video, that those are the constants, and that is that it has to be lacking in merit, and it has to be brought in bad faith. And so when the prosecutor, so we are able to defend against this effectively by saying what part is the prosecution what is he disagreeing with? What is he saying is frivolous? Is he disagreeing with the facts? And that is like punching him square in the chest, because there's no way. You're familiar. We've worked together a long time. It's very, very rare for them to actually dispute the facts, because it's their own admissions. What they want to do is not dispute
point out in
them.
The video, one of the common things you'll get from them is a straw man. The best the persecution can do is really provide a straw man response, really citing cases of legal interpretation instead of, what you are bringing up as a defendant, the issues of fact of, so they'll bring the straw man up for the judge to easily agree with, as long as the judge accepts that response, to the discrepancy you raised and challenged. So they make it easy for them to really bring this up and knock that down and really leave their main challenge. Well,
they'll never.
It's an easy way for them to dismiss it,
right? Because they're not ever going to address head on their lack of evidence. Because, well, I should know they rarely do that, because the only defense that they have, if they address the facts and admit that that's what they said, that's what's going on, their only way out is to say that they don't have to prove that. But even if we accept for just a second, for sake of argument, they don't actually have to prove the foundational claim. Let's just say that. That doesn't make my challenge frivolous. That doesn't make my argument frivolous. Because the facts are right, and the facts lead to the conclusion, and obviously because of that, it's not brought in bad faith. So it is rare, but they do argue, and that's why I bring up Tiffany Castillo in Concord, Massachusetts. She argued in open court she did not have to prove her foundational claim. And to me, that's a pretty strong.
That's a one hell of an argument to make.
Yeah. So that puts us in a pretty strong
and you
position.
wonder how that's able to fly.
Well, it's only able to fly because, as you've said, the judge and the prosecutor are, in these cases, working together. There's no other explanation for why a judge is going to turn around and, just bear with me for a second, is going to allow the prosecution to make a foundational legal claim against you with no proof and let them do that, but they won't allow you and I to do that. So why are they given such an unfair? Not that we want that, we don't. I'm just saying it's a grossly unfair advantage. Why does the judge favor the prosecution so strongly, where he's allowing him to do things he won't allow the defense to do? Because they're on the same team. They're on the same. And it doesn't matter if you turn around and, well, Mark, the judge ruled against the state here. So what? Right here, he's demonstrating a bias so strong that a fair trial is impossible. He's allowing the prosecution to argue without evidence. And in this case,
and that's where you gain your leverage.
We should have leverage there, yes, because not only is he allowing the prosecution to argue without evidence, which is a violation of due process and it's misconduct, it's a violation of Rule 3.1 of their ethical rules, but if they allow them to say that it's a frivolous argument, they're allowing the prosecution to lie. And I have direct personal firsthand knowledge of this. I have, maybe one day I'll release the audio now that things are over. I have you may not be aware of this. I have a administrative law judge in California saying that it doesn't matter if the Franchise Tax Board's counsel lied and falsified the record. There was nothing that could be done about it. But he was going to sanction my client $5,000 for a frivolous argument. So why the uneven treatment? What explains why the Franchise Tax Board or the prosecution is always favored to such a degree that the judge will throw out any due process rule in order to get that conviction?
Because there's cotton out there to pick. That's the only thing I can think of.
They're on the same team. They have an agenda. They're working together. So, all right. That's right. The thing is, well, judges hate the IRS. They rule against them all the time. That's not true. That is not true. The judges rule 100% of the time in favor of the IRS when you file even, a legitimate claim to stop the collection of a tax. They won't even discuss the Anti-Injunctive Tax Act. The U.S. attorney might, but I have personal experience with this. 100% of the time, the IRS wins in tax court. They win almost 100% of the time when it is a summons case. I have witnessed judges lying from the bench. It's not because I'm an anarchist. It's because they were lying. I had and so, yes, they may actually hate the IRS, Calvin. Let's give the critics that. They universally hate the IRS and despise them. They spit on their face. But that's not how they act when the IRS is the plaintiff or defendant. It's just not the way.
That seems like a very misty-eyed perspective, just considering the record.
Well, I think the last. Let me use the Gitlitz case as an example of extreme institutional bias. That was a case from 2001. The United States Supreme Court actually ruled against the IRS. Now, if you go back in the history of that case, obviously it was an appeal. It was the Supreme Court. That came from the tax court. He lost his shirt in the tax court. They were screaming frivolous like it was going out of style. He appealed it because he had money. He appealed it. Court of Appeals, frivolous, 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 frivolous. He appealed it. Actually got heard at the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said that the lower courts and the IRS had the opposite interpretation of the plain meaning of the statute. So that is one example where you can show, despite a statute being plainly worded, every step of the way they called him and said it was frivolous and ruled against him. How do you explain that? How do you explain
how these judges favor the IRS? I don't. Yeah.
Yeah. So for anyone to say that the IRS is not favored when they go into court is absolutely dead effing wrong and is ignoring, just decades and decades of case citations that you can, court opinions, and you can prove it. I have been involved with a handful, And I can tell you that they lie straight up. We have a mutual acquaintance. We're not going to mention any names on the show. And I went with them to federal court. And I've said this before, so please bear with me, everybody. It was an IRS summons case. The agent was actually in the court. This grotesquely obese, foul-smelling thing, this mountain of a man was actually in the court. So one of the first things this man did was say, I want the agent on the stand, and I want to confront him on his affidavit of good faith. Judge said, absolutely not. This is a show cause hearing, and it is not the proper time for that. So they continued the show cause hearing for another month or two. The first thing out of the gate was, I want the agent on the stand for cross-examination. Do you know what the judge did? The prosecutor, Wilhelm, actually said, objection, Your Honor, that ship has sailed. He had the opportunity at the first show cause hearing. And the judge says, yes, sir, that ship has sailed. Now, the thing is, critics will turn around and just say, well, I'm an idiot. That's not what really happened. That's not what was reported. Well, those intimate details are not generally reported in a trial court opinion. It's very rare that you actually have even a partial transcript in a trial court opinion. So it did happen. And that's what I have personal knowledge of, just how dishonest these friggin' judges are. There's no question when the IRS is involved, the judges throw the rules right out the window.
I'd like to say that takes some cojones to pull off, but when you have, an entity, such as the government behind, that has your back, you have balls the size of marbles and really have the cojones to throw that out there. But, yeah, that's, that's for, that's a trial issue. And then, once you get to trial, you should have brought that up earlier.
Yeah.
as if you didn't.
How many people have testified on the show that judges turn around at the arraignment? They turn around and say, well, that's a trial issue, sir. And you object, and he is adamant. You get to trial, you raise the issue of jurisdiction. Sir, that is a pretrial issue.
Right. Hey, so when it comes to court procedure, I do have a question, because it's been a while since I've been following material, but I noticed something of a shift when it comes to, well, at least in this video with the anatomy of a frivolous argument. But, last time, I was listening, it was more or less, we were putting questions to the defense or not to the defense, but to the prosecution, the plaintiffs, and to the judges. And so my question is, why are we now accepting that we are making any form of an argument when all we're doing is asking questions to determine whether or not the prosecution has met the minimum requirements to meet the burden of proof to bring a justicable case before the court in the first place? It seems like we're stepping into their trap by beginning to play the rigged game by, kind of putting it out there that we are actually making any form of an argument. Is there any reason why we are referring to ourselves as making an argument as opposed to asking questions to determine whether or not the prosecution has met the burden of proof?
Well, I don't have an issue making an argument. I mean, I've done the motion to dismiss for years. There's always an argument there that and I just think that the argument has to be, should be limited to, or any statements that we make should be limited to anything that, well, it should keep the burden on the prosecution. So if we're going to make an affirmative statement, it should be something like, hey, the prosecution hasn't offered sufficient facts. And so if they disagree with that, then the burden is still on them to show where those facts are, or it opens the door for a question. Oh, well, you have sufficient facts? What exactly are they? Because I'll plead guilty right now. So we still have to put in the motion to dismiss an argument. And the argument is, and I don't think it's a trap to have a good persuasive argument that the prosecution has failed to meet their burden. I mean, I don't see anything wrong with that. It certainly doesn't waive personal jurisdiction, which some people like to argue that it does, although there's plenty of evidence contrary to that.
Right. And it's still based on the prosecution's, lack of providing sufficient facts and evidence to bring the case before the court. So, I do understand that it's, it's these questions that lead to the basis of the argument that is in the motion to dismiss. But, that was only the subtle shift I've seen in the argument. Because before, especially when when it comes to courtroom litigation, we strictly stuck to just asking questions to see if the prosecution has met the burden and refrained from making any type of argument. But then again, I understand that was essentially making any kind of legal argument, using the legal words.
Well, unfortunately, when in Rome, you have to do something that the judge understands. It's got to be in a format that the judge will actually pay attention to. So if you don't use the right format, it doesn't matter how good your argument is. They're not going to. They're just going to throw it out as legalistic gibberish. So we're forced to do that. We're forced to participate anyway. And there's other argument. We also argue that the prosecution is engaged in prosecutorial misconduct, or they're violating Rule 3.1 because they're lying in court. What they're saying is false, and they know it to be false. So when we use the facts to back that up. So the arguments that we're raising, I don't think are diminishing our effectiveness. Some people, are going away and doing some other things, would do that. Somebody went and told me the other day that they were doing the whole, the name game. And I'm like, well, those arguments are trash and shouldn't. But before we're out of time, I'm gonna just stay with me. We do have some callers, so I know he's been pretty patient. So before we're out of time, let me bring Scott in Atlanta on with us. Scott, welcome back to the show.
Yes, sir, buddy. I've got some questions. I'm just going to start talking, and you just tell me if I'm wrong or not, because I've been studying. First, I want to thank you for your passion in this. I feel the same because my rights have been violated and all that good stuff. Anyway, I had an incident happen on the 6th of September. I got in a traffic accident. It wasn't my fault. And was arrested for an expired driver's license. They towed my vehicle. I wasn't injured, and they took me to the hospital. I was got in a traffic accident. Excuse me. I just hated cookies. Just trying to get rid of it.
You had 40 minutes to eat the cookie, my friend.
Huh?
I said you had 40 minutes to eat that cookie.
I know. Well, I've been eating them for 40 minutes.
Oh, well, hey, there you go. It's biscotti al cioccolato.
All right. So I wasn't injured.
That didn't.
Okay. I was chained to a gurney with leg irons and handcuffs for 9.5 hours, begging for water. Yeah.
Wow.
So then, I know. I'm a criminal. I was driving around with an expired driver's license. So,
what was the pretext for the stop?
Say again?
What was the pretext for the stop again?
It was a traffic accident.
Oh, the accident. All right. So you're okay. I got it. All right.
So then I was taken to jail and they took my money and like $250, my cell phone, keys and everything, and they put them in property at another location 10 miles from the jail. Put me out on the street at 4 o'clock in the morning, across the street from Greyhound, with no money, no cell phone, no way of contacting anybody. I walked across the street to the Greyhound, and I don't know what for. There were people over there I was going to talk to until the train was activated, and but didn't have any money, so I had to beg for that. Got on this train. They told me all the information that I had. I could get down at the where I could collect my property, and I got down there, and they said that I didn't have any. I needed to get a title or a registration. So that was a wasted trip. It took me, 2 hours to do that. So then I had to beg for money again to get back on the train to get home. Anyway, so now my question is a driver. My thing is you got a right to travel on the public highway and not have to have a license or a contract to do it. Is that true?
Well, there's no evidence that their laws apply. There's no argument for me on that. But as far as the right to travel legal argument, that doesn't have any weight. And if you're under the impression that a contract is involved with a driver's license, that is absolutely false.
Well, from what I understand, a contract is two or more named parties on a document is enforceable by law. The state will tell you that it's not a contract, but then why does your name have to be on it?
Well, a contract, there's 4 factual elements to have a contract, even under their law. Okay, this is pretty well established. There has to be an offer. There has to be a meeting of the minds. There has to be a freely made agreement, and there has to be a valuable consideration. So it's not just putting your name on a piece of paper. I mean, that's come on, we're a little more sophisticated than that. It's a very common thing in the, unfortunately, it's still very common. But when you start looking at the facts and see if the facts support the argument, no, the facts destroy the argument. And just as far as the right to travel legal argument, if you're using it in a legal sense based on court cases, a lot of those cases, let's say all of those cases that make a distinction between the ordinary use of the streets and the extraordinary use, where only the extraordinary use, like the use of as a business, is licensed, all those cases were overturned. I reported on this in a whole section of Government Indicted. I'm not saying I agree with their laws and that there's any evidence their laws apply, but from a legal standpoint, if you accept that the system is valid, if you accept that the Constitution applies and creates obligations, then you have to accept that their laws, when deemed constitutional,
well, from what I understand, it's in Black's law, a highway is a free way to travel for the public to use the private automobiles on the roads and the highway. Every road, street, drive, court, highway in America is public. I am public, and I have the right to use it when, how, and what with, so long as I use it for what it is intended for. No one has suffered a loss or harm from my actions.
But they have
I have to get a license.
Yeah, they changed their laws, Scott. They changed their laws because you have an operator's license. See, you used to just have a hack license, okay? But now you have an operator's license and you have an actual commercial license, and you have different types, and you have a chauffeur's license. You're legally not allowed to drive a cab or a limousine for somebody as a business with just an operator's license. Right. You have to have the chauffeur. So the idea that the operator's license is the chauffeur's license just absolutely makes no sense. So so
a driver is a commercial term. So a driver is one who gets paid for the delivery of goods or persons of the like. It's a truck driver, bus driver, delivery driver, taxi driver. I'm not a driver. I'm a private person traveling.
You're an operator, but you're defined as an operator. If you're using the definitions, I'll give you this much. If you're going to use
operator the commercial term,
no, it's not always a commercial term. If you use, let's put it this way, because I'm running out of time here. If your defense is going to be that you're going to argue that the laws mean something different than what the prosecution claims, you're going to lose, and you're going to lose every time. It's far more, your burden of proof on an issue of law, of legal interpretation, is extremely high. And there are thousands of court cases that say the complete opposite of what you are saying, and you're not going to be able to provide one single valid case that counters theirs. It's far more effective, in my experience, and Calvin can affirm this too, because he's done it, to challenge the prosecution from a factual basis, that their arguments are not based on sufficient facts, as opposed to, because that's a much lower threshold of proof, as opposed to what you want to do, which you're just not going to win. That you could think that, this is what the law says. I'm not a taxpayer within meaning a statute. Well, there's 7,000 court cases that say otherwise. Now, you may disagree with that, and the courts may be wrong, but it's not going to be a very effective way to defend yourself. And I certainly wouldn't defend on legal interpretation in court, because first of all, they don't give a damn what you and I think the laws say. They don't care. So
it's a crime. It's a crime, right?
What's a crime?
Well, it says on my ticket that it's a misdemeanor.
Okay.
So if it's a misdemeanor and a crime, I need to know if it's a crime against who is a legal, valid complaining party on record seeking remedy or relief from my actions on the day in question when I didn't have an expired driver's license.
They're going to say,
up in a court of law, point their finger at me and say, I am the one that caused them a loss or harm from my actions for not having it.
They're going to say it's the state. They're going to say it's the state. I think it's better question to ask.
You can't put cast with a ghost on the stand.
Well, no, they're going to. I think it's going to be. I'm almost out of time here. I think it's. And I hope you can call back and we'll get you on. This is a special show because Calvin is first time in a couple of years he's been on. We'll call back on a Wednesday show. We can talk a little bit more about this because it's going to be more effective to point out that the prosecutor and challenge him on the facts to show personal and subject matter jurisdiction. Show me the facts that show that just because I'm physically in Atlanta, that your constitutional laws apply and create obligations on me and give you jurisdiction. Because that not only is the basis of personal jurisdiction, it's the foundation for subject matter jurisdiction. Because if you start, and I do in my motion to dismiss, I do bring up the valid cause of action that there has to be facts, though. Facts. So I look at it, where are the facts? And it's the same thing with the corpus delicti. The corpus delicti is the act and the result, and there has to be facts to support both of those, not just one, which is what they typically do. So I wish I had more time, Scott. Can you call back on Wednesday?
What time?
Now, you see, we are off to a good start. The Wednesday show starts. It's 3 to 4 Pacific time.
I'll do it.
All right, fantastic. I'll talk to you then. I appreciate the call.
Thanks for your time, buddy.
No problem. Yeah, Calvin, it's unfortunate that people are still caught up in that stuff.
It is, but I want to mention that there's a whole series of videos we have on the YouTube channel of tools with dealing with bureaucrats. So for Scott out there, I'd recommend him looking up those series of videos because those will be very instructive as far as how to formulate a response to the prosecutor's complaint. So definitely check that out.
Well, I appreciate we've got that. And we got the forum, which I'm spending more time on, and I'm going to be starting to do more. I know I missed it this week. It's a bad week, but I will be spending more time getting back to doing the role playing with people. We want to be, I think the most effective way, and it's proven very effective, Calvin, of course, to go in as a skeptic and use basic principles of logic, regardless of the people who are attacking you, what they may say that, oh, you can't bring logic into our courts. I know that's wrong. You're defending yourself. You're supposed to have a right to defend yourself. And the proceedings are advertised as being fair. And you take advantage of that. You use that to our advantage. We know that the burden of proof is supposed to be on them. And one of the most important things we can do is to keep the burden of proof on them. If we're making legal arguments, and this goes directly to what Scott was saying, if we're making arguments based on legal interpretation, it's up to us to prove that that's true. We have to prove that that's true. It takes the spotlight off the prosecution. But if we're saying that the prosecution doesn't have the facts, the prosecution now, what they're supposed to do is they're supposed to produce those facts. So it keeps the burden on them.
That's right. By keeping it simple, you're definitely keeping it simple by focusing on the facts and evidence as opposed to taking up any kind of legal argument and arguing that. The simplest defense is usually the most effective defense.
It can be. And here, when we're talking about the legal argument being one of legal interpretation, my case law is better than your case law. And that is a loser, especially, at least for us. We are not going to prevail on legal interpretation. That's just not the way. It maybe some people here and there have been able to do that in this context. But generally, no, they bring the hammer down on you because they have conflicting case opinions, and theirs are going to take that they're going to win. They're going to win. Well, I appreciate Calvin. It's been great having you back.
Who would think you would fall in favor of themselves, as far as the rulings?
Oh, of course. Of course. The prosecution's always going to win on legal interpretation in this context. Absolutely. But I appreciate you. Give me a call back so we right after the show. But I appreciate you coming back, and I'm looking forward to more shows with you. We got a lot of stuff to still get to. I'll be live on the Wednesday broadcast from 3 to 4 Pacific Standard Time, as always. So whoever we missed today, please call early into that show. I appreciate everyone's continued support of the big broadcast. Of course, Chris in California, who's bringing the next 10 shows or more. I really do appreciate it. And if you'd like to be able to support the show also, markstevens.sales.com and markstevens.net, and say, hey, I did that correct for the whole show. I didn't try to give the phone number for that like I have done. So I appreciate everyone tuning in for the big broadcast here on October 5th, 2019. Until we're live again on the Wednesday broadcast. Salud.